as Dan said, we're going to be talking about adding some forward-looking capabilities to our dashboards and KPIs. Dan already went through a very nice introduction. Appreciate that. So we can skip right on to the good stuff. So much of our organizational reporting today still is backward-looking. It's looking at what happened previous month, previous quarter, previous year. So we're getting better along those lines, but we still have a long ways to go. For information, this type of information, it does have value. It tells us where we've been and perhaps where we are currently. But we can have more value if we get these data visualizations and these KPIs to help us with some indication about where we are likely to be going in the future. Okay. Our decision makers often look at this past information, and even though the information doesn't have a forward-looking component to it, the decision makers themselves are making some type of extrapolation from the current state data and from the past data to estimate where we're likely to be heading as an organization in the future. But as these decision makers are making those mental extrapolations, it's difficult for them to keep in mind all of the different variables that come into play as they're making these predictions. So instead, let's take a look now at having our KPIs take advantage of more of what we know, pull in some existing information, additional information to help us add that extrapolation right to the KPI, right to the data visualization to assist the decision maker in making a more complete prediction, taking a more complete view of what's coming ahead. So what I'm going to be talking about here is not highly complex. We're not talking about data mining. We're not talking about predictive analytics unless you want to define predictive analytics in the most basic level. Instead, we're talking about some simple techniques, easy to implement, that we can use to add some very basic predictive capabilities. I'm going to be looking at doing this through querying relational SQL tables, but of course we can do the same types of predictive calculations within our tabular and our multidimensional models, so we can do that there as well. But the examples that I'll look at for this presentation will be SQL queries, and we'll start out with some pretty straightforward SQL queries, and we'll get a little more complex as we go along. All of the visualizations that we're going to be looking at are going to be done in reporting services, and we're going to try and vary the visualizations as we go from one example to the next, so we see some variety there, and maybe expose a few features of reporting services that you may not have been aware of as we go along as well. So the scenarios for our demo today, we're going to jump forward here about a month and say that we are at the completion of Q3 in calendar 2014. And what we want to do is make some predictions, look ahead at how we're going to finish up the year. What can we expect in Q4 of calendar 2014 to see how we're going to end. We're going to have our KPIs help with the decisions for the coming month, coming quarter, or year end to make sure that we finish up meeting the goals or meeting the business requirements that we need to at the end of the year. So the first example we're going to look at is a sales example We've got a quantity of goods sold versus an annual goal. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that. I've got my reporting services report here in Data Tools in Visual Studio. And we have a pretty simple bar chart here showing my total sales of $2.676 million. And my sales goal for the year, my annual sales goal is $3.5 million. So, of course, the first thing that my sales manager is going to do is do some extrapolation. Are we likely to reach our goal of $3.5 million by the end of the year? So we'll do a little ratio here. We've got 3 quarters of data in the books. We want to extrapolate to our 4 quarters in the year. We know that 2.676, that should actually be million units, have been sold in the first 3 quarters. So what can we expect for our sales for the year? Doing a little manipulation of our ratio there, we get that we're going to multiply 2.676 times 4, divide by 3, and that gives us a projected sales for the year of 3.568. So that is above our sales goal. It looks like we're going to make the goal. We can all kick back, schedule those long vacations for Thanksgiving and the holidays, and it's all good. We're just going to coast into the finish line. The problem is we need to look at our historical data. So if we go back and look at our sales history chart here, we'll go ahead and preview that. And we can see that in the last 3 quarters of the year, our sales tend to be down. Now, that's not too surprising. We've got a number of holidays and lots of things going on at the end of the year. So that's not too surprising that our sales take a dip. But what does that mean for our estimation process? Are we estimating too high when we look at our sales for the end of the year? Yep, our KPI can take into account this dip in sales to help us make a prediction. So now let's make our ratio a little more inclusive of our past year sales. So we're going to take the past 3 years of sales in Q4 as a ratio to the past 3 years sales in Q1 through 3, and say that that's going to be equal to our current year Q4 sales, which we want to solve for, over our current year sales for the first 3 quarters of the year. Again, if we solve that, we're going to take the past 3 years Q4 sales times the current year Q1 through 3 sales, divide that by the past 3 years Q1 through Q3 sales, and that will give us an estimate of the current year Q4 sales based on performance over the last 3 years. Okay, so let's take a look at how that plays out. We go to our chart here showing the KPI now with our estimate. We've got our actual sales, and then we're stacking on top of that our estimated sales using that ratio, and we're estimating that our total sales are actually going to be $3.49 million. So that's going to be about $10,000 under our sales goal rather than over the sales goal when we take that into account. So there may be some work that our sales team needs to do to make sure that we finish above our goal as we would like. So let's take a look at how we're coming up with those figures. And we've got our query here that is doing that estimation. I'm going to actually, let's take a look at that. And I'm going to actually copy that out into a query window here so we can see things in a little better light. Okay, so the first thing we're doing here is getting the sales for the first 3 quarters of this year based on the current date for months 1 through 9, getting that total sales. Doing the same thing for the past 3 years. So getting the dates for the past 3 years, months 1 through 9. And make sure here I want to get average sales per year. So I'm going to divide that quantity by 3 because it is the total sales for 3 years. Then let's look at how we've done in Q4 in the past 3 years. So again, find the years for the past 3 years. And now I'm looking at months 10, 11, and 12. Get the total sales, and again, divide by 3 because that is 3 years worth of sales, and I want to average that out per year. All right. And then if we aren't exactly at the end of Q3, if there are some sales that have been recorded in Q4, we do want to take those into account and not double dip those if we need to. So now we're going to do our estimation. We'll join everything together into a single table. And first we're going to take our actual for 2014 and output that as the first item in our result set, our actual quantity sold year to date. And then we're going to union that with a second record that's going to be our estimate. We do the calculation as we talked about here based on our ratio, and we'll come up with that amount. So when we execute the query, we're going to get 2 records. We're creating a stacked bar chart, so we're going to stack these 2 values, one on top of the other in our stacked bar chart. The first is going to be the actual value. The second is going to be what we project for Q4 sales, and then we'll show the total of that. So again, going back to our chart here, there we've got those 2 quantities stacked one on top of the other, and then we've manipulated the value that's being displayed here so it shows the total, the year-to-date, or the total year cumulative sales rather than just the value for this second bar that we're adding in. The other thing that I want to point out here is we have a second data set that is being used to pull in our sales goal. And that is pretty straightforward. We're just getting that value here. When I execute that, I'm just getting 1 record with our sales goal for the year. And the way I'm using that is to draw that goal line across the top of the chart. And that's being done by a feature of the axis on the chart called a strip line. If I select the axis and look at the properties window here, I can see I have a collection called strip lines. And if I look at what's in that collection, I can see that I have 1 strip line defined. And that line is going to be a solid green line of 2-point width. And the interval offset determines where that line starts. So it's going to, or where it appears, and that's going to be at the value of my sales goal from the sales goal query. And then I am also adding a title or a label to that strip line, and I can manipulate the color and the rotation and the position of that title relative to the strip line so that I get a nicely labeled line that indicates this is the sales goal. So that's the strip line feature of charting in reporting services. Let's move on to another example here. Now let's take a look at production. We're looking at the quantity produced per month from our manufacturing process versus an annual production goal. So we'll switch over to now chart number 4. I'm going to go ahead and close some of these so we can see our next features as we move forward. All right, so if we look at production per month, we can see our stepped chart here as the number of units produced year to date continues to climb. We're at 2.626 units produced through the first 9 months of the year. Again, the goal is at 3.5 million units. Sorry, I wasn't too creative with my examples here. Yes, those are the same numbers from the previous example. Sorry about that. You'll just have to bear with me on that. Again, it is the temptation of our production manager to extrapolate that out and see that it looks like we're going to exceed our production goal for the year. Everybody's happy. However, what do we know about the last 2 or 3 months of the year? There should be 3 months there. There are lots of legal holidays, and I guess especially those last 2 months. We've got Thanksgiving, we've got holiday break, and in addition, our manufacturing plant shuts down from December 24th through December 31st. So that's a long amount of downtime. How is that going to affect our production that we're going to project for the rest of the year? Well, the first thing that we need to do then is figure out what are our producing days on the calendar. So we've created a table. We'll take a look at the contents of that table. It has a record for each day in the year, the day of the week, just for reference, and then a flag to show whether that is a date we are in production. We don't produce on the weekends, so Saturdays and Sundays are all non-producing times. And then also, let me go ahead and we'll get a few more records up here. Scroll down a little farther, and we can see that this entire segment of at the end of December, we're not in production any of the days from December 24th through December 31st. So we've captured that in a table that we can utilize in our report to determine what our production days are for the remainder of the year. So now what we're going to do is look at our actual production year to date, and we're going to add to it the average daily production that we've seen through the first 9 months of the year and multiply it by the number of production days that remain in the rest of the year. So let's see what that looks like. Actually, we'll go over to our report here. So here's our KPI with the estimate, and we've added a few things here. Here's our estimated production for each of the 3 remaining months, and you can see that it looks like we're going to come up just a bit short again of our goal. We're not going to make it. And to be clear, what is being shown on the chart, we've got a line here that indicates everything to the left are actuals and everything to the right are estimated numbers. We want to be very clear as we're doing these forward-looking visualizations that we note what are real numbers and what are our estimates. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. We've got our production information. And again, we'll copy that query over to the query window for some ease of viewing. right. So I've again broken this up into a number of queries here. We're getting the average daily production for the year. So this is the production for each date, and then taking the average, and also noting what is the last date that we have actual numbers for. Then we're going to estimate production by looking at all of the production days that remain in our calendar from the max production date, from the day after the max production date through to the end of the year. And then we're going to look at the number. We're going to come up with the days that we are in production, and then we're going to take the number produced for each of those days, and either it will be the actual number produced or it will be the estimated production that we've come up with to come up with our production for each month. So we've got the number expected for each month, we've got the year-to-date value, and again, months 10, 11, and 12 are based on estimates off of the number of production days in the month and the average amount produced for each of those days. The other thing that I want to point out here is we're using the strip line on this chart a little more than in the previous one. We're adding a strip line to the horizontal axis to demark where our estimate versus actual is. We're also using strip lines to create the shading effect to note when we're below goal and approaching goal, and then when we're above our goal. So we'll take a look at that real briefly. Again, if we look at the properties of the vertical axis and go down to our strip line collection, we've now got 3 strip lines that we're putting on the chart. The first one is the same as before, putting a 2-point wide green line where the sales goal is to demark that very sharply. Then we have a strip line that has shading from a light red to a yellow gradient from bottom to top. And the width of that is actually going to be the goal amount. So that strip line will run from our 0 value up to the goal value. And the other thing that I've done here is for these colors, I've used not only picked a color, but I've also used the transparency here. So I've got the transparency setting, since this goes from 0 to 255, it's actually at about 25% or 75% transparent, depending on how you want to look at it. So I get the nice wash of the color. And then finally, I've got a strip line that starts at the goal, and its width is from the maximum value, which is 4 million, from the goal line to the max value, and that has the green shading. So I get the nice effect, the nice color washes behind here, again helping the user interpret what does it mean to be below the goal line, what does it mean to be above the goal line. All right, let's close those down. And we'll look at our next scenario here. We're going to switch now from production to a consulting or some other type of service sales for our next example. We're going to look at our booked hours for the coming quarter. So we'll switch over to our first visualization here, and switching now to radial gauge. And our gauge shows that we have just over 7,500 hours of booked business for the fourth quarter for our consultants. Okay, that really doesn't tell us much at the moment, so let's continue to refine that and give us some better information here on what we need. Now let's look at a projection, because we still got some sales that are in process for the fourth quarter. So the first chart just showed those sales that are closed, that have happened, that are sold business. But we have other sales that may still close and generate some billing hours in the fourth quarter. And what we're going to do is look at the projected hours for those sales, and we're going to multiply that by a confidence percent. So if I have a sale that would generate an estimated 1,000 hours of billing, and I'm about 50% confident that that's going to close, then I'm going to add 500 hours to my projection here of booked hours. If I'm 75% sure, then I'm going to add more hours. If I'm only 25%, I'm going to add less. So that gives me some way of laying out an intelligent projection of hours for the fourth quarter. So now when I look at this chart with my projected hours of probable closed sales, I'm now up to about 8,750 hours. Let's take a quick look at that, at the query here that adds in the estimated hours, and we'll copy that over to our query window. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is find the average hours worked, the average billing hours from my billing for the year. So what is my average billing for a day? Then what I need to do is I need to figure out, if I've got a sale that's out there, I need to determine what hours have already been billed prior to the fourth quarter and what hours are likely to be billed in the fourth quarter. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm looking at when a job started. If it started prior to the fourth quarter, then I'm going to count the number of billing days that occurred prior to the fourth quarter, multiply that by my average hours billed. Again, I'm estimating here. So I'm going to find out how much billing do I think for this particular job occurred before my fourth quarter window. Then I'm going to look and determine what is the maximum that could be billed for that job within my fourth quarter window. So if it didn't start, or if it wasn't already in place on October 1st, but maybe it started November 1st, then obviously there's less that could be billed for that. But what's the maximum that could have been billed for that job? And then my sales certainty, as I said, what percent am I certain that that job is going to take place? And I'm looking at both my active sales as well as those that are pending, because I'm using my sales certainty. So then finally, I'm going to look and see if I've got my estimated billable hours for each job. I'm going to subtract out the number of hours that would have already occurred before my fourth quarter window. If that's greater than the number of billing hours that could occur for that within that window, then I'm going to use that max. Otherwise, I'm going to use my actual calculated amount. And as I said, I'm going to multiply that by my sales certainty. And this works well because the certainty for my sold sales is 100%. So I can just multiply everything by that sales certainty. And again, that gets me my estimated booked hours for quarter 4. All right. Okay. The next question then that naturally comes along is, do we have enough consultant hours to cover the projected book hours? So we're going to do an estimate of capacity that we have available to us. So let's switch over to that. We'll close that up. So here's my capacity planning. Notice we got a little fancier with our gauge now. We've added some labeling here with color coding, so I know that the green needle is showing me my estimated booked hours for the quarter. My blue is showing me the available consultant hours for the quarter. And then I've got a little range that shows up on the scale that shows the range is going to be gold if I have excess capacity. It's going to be red if I have a capacity shortfall. And right now, my chart is showing that I have an excess of 96 hours, consultant hours, that are available in Q4. If I look at the query here for available hours, you can see that I am querying my calendar. I'm determining how many employees I had on each day in the quarter, each production day in the quarter based on start date and termination date, and then multiplying that by the average hours billed per day by my employees during the current year. So I am taking into account any non-production days, any holidays that are in place. Okay, but what about time off in addition to the holidays that is going to occur? I certainly need to take that into account as well. So let's go to the next chart here, and this is now including my PTO. So when I preview that, now with my scheduled time off, I'm going to have a 128-hour shortfall for my estimated booked hours. So I have some management work to do here to make sure that I can keep all of my clients happy. And the way that I'm doing that is simply by taking the scheduled PTO time for each of my employees. I'm now adding that to the mix, and my employees in this particular case can either schedule a full day off or a half day off. So I look at what they have scheduled, if it's a full day, 1, or a half day, 0.5, and subtracting out those PTO days from the count of billing days that I have before I figure out how many consultant billable hours I have available. And that brings things down to just slightly under what I have booked, or am estimating that I have booked. So I've got my capacity planning here. In this case is doing some estimation of sales that are likely to close, and then also adding in some known factors about time off with holidays and scheduled vacation time to help me look forward at what the situation is likely to be in quarter 4 for my capacity versus booked hours. All right. And our last example here, we're going to look at revenue. how much cash are we likely to receive in October? And the way we're going to do that is looking at invoices which have a due date, a payable date, within the month of October. So if we look at that visualization, and based on that, it looks like I'm going to get in over $260,000 in the month of October. And that's in my green region, according to the visualization here. So that should make me pretty happy. And let's take a look at the query quickly. Pretty straightforward. I'm just summing up the invoice amount for invoices that have not yet been paid. I do have a flag to note that an invoice is in dispute, and so I'm not taking any of those into account if there's an invoice being disputed by a client. And then the due date needs to be prior to the end of October. So I'm expecting anything that was due in October or prior that has not been paid to be paid in the month of October, and that's where I come up with my $262,000 figure. However, what do we know about clients paying invoices? What we know, if you've had any experience in that area, is that they don't always pay on time. So can we take that into account? Can we look at their past payment history and add that to our prediction? And what we're going to do is a term in the credit business called days beyond term. So when a client paid an invoice, how many days was it beyond the due date? So let's take a look at that. And if we move ahead to our expected revenue with DBT incorporated into there, I can see that I really have some slow-paying clients because my revenue goes down to $157,000. So if I take a look at that quickly, and what I'm looking at here is all the invoices that have been paid. I'm using the last 6 months as my go-by to determine my client payment history. You can go back farther or shorter. You want to get enough information to have a pretty good gauge of how the clients are paying. You don't want to go back too long because the payer's circumstances change, and how well they are at paying their invoices can change over time. So 6 months is a pretty good window here. And what we're looking at is, for paid invoices, the difference between the date that they actually paid the invoice and the invoice date plus the term. So if I invoice them on September 1st and the terms were a net 30, then the due date was actually September 30th. So how far after that did the client actually pay? And days beyond term in this calculation could be a negative number, meaning they paid before the due date. And if a client has a habit of paying a week ahead of the due date, I want to take that into account as well. So now I get, so this first query calculates the days beyond term for each invoice, and then I'm going to average that for each client. And now as I look at what's likely to be paid, I'm going to incorporate the days beyond term as well as the term. So the invoice, maybe the invoice went out on September 1st. The terms were net 30. Then in addition, I'm going to add in the average days beyond term for each of those. And that now, because I have late paying clients, that puts things down to 157. All right, so, well, that was bad news, but yeah, I'm concerned now about my cash flow. So let's use this chart and add in my expected expenses to see how I'm actually going to do here as I plan the month of October. So this chart, we've got the expected revenue versus expenses for the month of October. You can see I've got my green needle here that's showing my expected revenue right at that 157,000. And then I have two bars that I've added to the chart. One shows my fixed expenses. Those things, you know, I've got to pay employees, I've got to pay rent. Those are all my fixed expenses for the month of October. But I do have some discretionary spending that I had planned for the month of October. And if I hover over here, I actually have a nice tooltip that shows me my 3 discretionary items that I had planned. A marketing campaign. I have some employees that want to purchase standing desk attachments, and then I also have a server upgrade that is out there. So that's nice. I've got a lot of information here. Let's look at one feature I just want to point out on this chart. I actually have, if I look at the chart, I've got 3 pointers on the chart. Now, it doesn't look like 3 pointers, but actually this and this are pointers on the chart as well. So if I look at the properties of this pointer here, you can see that the pointer style is a bar. Rather than being a marker or a thermometer, I'm actually creating a bar on the scale, and I can set the value for that and also where that bar starts. So my red bar starts at the bottom of the scale and goes up to a calculated value for my fixed spending. And then the orange bar here actually starts where my fixed spending leaves off, this expression here, and goes up to the top of my discretionary spending. So I can mix the pointers shown on my visualization to get a very informative look at the data. But now, so this is nice, but it would be even better if I could add some what if to this to do my planning. So we'll run this final visualization here. This looks about the same, but I've got a parameter up here where I can add in or take out these 3 discretionary items. So let's see, if I take out my server upgrade and look at how things fare there, now my total expenses are under my expected revenue for October. So that's pretty good, except maybe my server upgrade is kind of vital for the continuation of business. So let's try maybe taking out the marketing campaign. And now I'm over budget. Maybe I take out my standing desks as well. And you can see I've got the ability to do some what-if calculations to determine how I might plan my discretionary spending for the month. So not only have I added now these predictive capabilities to predict my revenue, but also, excuse me, also I've added in some what-if capabilities to help with that planning. So that's my presentation. We can open it up to questions at this point. If anyone has any, I will be happy to answer.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Brian. Wow, that was a lot of demos there. That was great. Great use of all the different visualizations as well. Way to touch on just about all of them, I think, you covered.
I tried to hit a lot of them.
Yeah, and those tool tips, is there a timeout feature on there?
You know, I don't know if there is a user-settable timeout feature on there. That's a great question. I do not know that. If
There's a lot of
there
times
is,
when
I
I'm
haven't
hovering
found
over them. I'm hovering over them, and they
okay, I'll hover over again. I'll hover
it.
over again. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do have a couple of examples or questions here. First one, I think it goes back to your production example. They were curious about how did you create the actual estimate line in the production sample? So I think you had.
Okay, yeah, I did not talk about that one. So let's look at that. So here's my actual estimate line on the production example. And first of all, I have a query here that simply finds, we'll just look at it here quick. It simply finds the maximum month that I have production information reported to in the current year. And because I want the line to kind of show up between the month 9 and month 10, I'm actually adding 0.5 to it. So I get a value of 9.5. So I have actual values up through month 9 or September. So that's how I get the value. And then I'm using the strip line again, but this time I'm using it on the horizontal axis. So if we look at that strip line collection. And one thing I should point out, if I look at the properties of the horizontal axis in the pop-up here, the dialog box, that strip line does not show up on any of my pages. So the only way I can access that functionality is over here in the Properties window if I look at that strip line collection. So I've created that strip line. This time it's a deep red, a maroon, and I'm setting it up so that the interval offset is equal to that 9.5 that I calculated. And then I've got my title text has this actual and estimate, and I did a little manipulation. It's centered on the strip line, and I did a little manipulation so that as it's centered, it actually gets the text to straddle the line nicely to show the actual side and the estimate side. And that's why there's a few more dashes in the arrow here. It was to get the centering to line up right. Adding spaces, it would just trim out, so I had to use something other than space to get it to center.
Sure, that makes sense. Great. A question, and I think I already know the answer to this one, is the data from AdventureWorks.
No, it is not. It's actually kind of a rework of the data from my business intelligence book. And I can make the sample database available and the sample reports with all the queries if that would be appropriate.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sure that'd be great. Oh, they were wondering, was it from the Max Min miniatures?
Yes, it is. Wow, I have a fan apparently. Yes, it's the Max Min miniatures data that's been manipulated a little bit.
Okay, next question. Yes, please, sample code would be greatly appreciated.
All right, will do.
Then another question. Oh, you're a fan again. Yes, I love your book. Great feedback.
Wow.
We have another one. Very
Excellent.
Nice blending. Just some feedback for you from another user here. Very nice blending of analytical thinking and real-world implementation.
Wow. Well, that's much appreciated.
User, was wondering, what is the title of the book? I think you have that in your slide deck, right?
Yeah, I can bring that back up here. Let's see if we go. Yeah, if I knew how to use PowerPoint, that would help. There we go. So the book that we're referring to that the sample data comes from is the Delivering Business Intelligence with Microsoft SQL 2012.
Great. And I think that wraps up, unless anyone else has any last second questions here. We'll give people just another minute or so. I think we've covered them all.
That's good. Yeah, and if no one else has a question, I'll just make one comment. I had a client just the first part of this week who challenged the team that we have working at their organization to be creative with the visualizations and not just duplicate what was being done manually in a spreadsheet, but really look at what decision the subject matter experts or the users are making, and then fit that visualization to provide the most amount of information, or most amount of key information in the simplest format. And we all need that reminder now and again. But it is very important as we're creating these visualizations that sometimes we need to shake these users up a little bit and say, well, what if you looked at it this way? Wouldn't that be more helpful? And so we always need to keep that in mind.
Definitely, that's a very good reminder. I guess one user was wondering if this topic was actually a chapter in the book.
It is not. Certainly, in switching now to the reporting services, my reporting services book, most maybe of these features are covered in the reporting services book. I will be honest and say that the strip lines is a feature that was pointed out to me after this book was published. So it'll be in the next version, the next edition of the book. But so strip lines isn't in there. But most of the other information is in there, not in these particular examples, but covered in other ways.
Does that mean you'll be writing a SQL Server 2016 book?
I'll have to talk to the family about that. We'll see. It depends on how far behind we fall in the college fund here.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our time here. I definitely want to thank you for your time, Brian. I want to thank everyone who attended. We had just over, I think, right around 120 people attending, so that's great. And then just a reminder that our next meeting will be on September 18th, and we have Mark coming back to us again this month to talk about Azure machine learning. And any parting last words of advice, words of wisdom, Brian?
Be creative with your data visualizations.
Great. Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all.